today we saw quite a bit of action on the financial counters. The index closed just a little bit higher than we've seen the past week, up 2.9 points to settle at about 3,186.64. Equity Bank traded at about 1.26 million shares. The price was staying between the 1350, 1360 range. We also saw quite some interest on Kenya Commercial Bank counter as well. Going forward for this week, the equities front is expected to play within the 3,100, 3,200 mark. Going to the shilling now, it lost ground against the dollar at the open of the week. There was little demand for the US currency from sectors such as energy, and we also saw minimal dollar inflows, though traders say this is likely to change as we go into the holiday season and the historic diaspora remittances coming in. But the shilling was trading at about 75.30, 75.50 per dollar compared to Friday's close of 75.05 and 75.15. And it is expected to continue trading within that range for the rest of this week. And joining us in studio now to talk about the latest news from the Nairobi Stock Exchange is Dickson Magulu and from Emerging Africa Capital. Dickson, thanks for joining us. Equity Bank was one of the biggest movers today, as I said earlier, climbed up about 10 cents to settle at 1360 after it was raised from buy to accumulate. Who else was moving the market today?
Well, one thing about Equity Bank is that if you're to look at the closing numbers for last week, it was among the highest movers. Yeah. So that again drew the market towards that counter. So it was expected that there'll be a bit of action on that counter. Apart from that, I guess Access Kenya, I think at the close of last week, you also did see that Access Kenya moved quite a number of shares. So again, that has helped in drawing a lot of interest towards that counter.
Mm-hmm. Some of the news expected from the NSE tomorrow is the release of the debenture issue for Uchumi. There's quite a bit of interest into whether Uchumi will be relisted again. Mixed reactions from brokers saying there's probably quite some investor fatigue. You know, what are your expectations on what we're likely to see, and what other instruments can Uchumi use if the debenture issue fails? Well,
one thing about the Uchumi counter is that since June 2006, most investors who had invested in Uchumi have lost out. Basically, their value has been locked up for close to 3 years. We're actually going to the 4th year. So again, as far as investor fatigue is concerned, I think most people who had invested in Uchumi are not really willing to take up the debentures as much as Uchumi is has turned the corner. I mean, Uchumi is very profitable at the moment, but still, I think for those whose value has been locked up for 4 years, they are very, very much unwilling to, continue investing more in Uchumi. So I think the option in that case will be the government coming in. I think an idea had been floated at some point that should the investors fail to take up the debentures, then the government would move in and capitalize its what it had advanced to Uchumi in order to make up for the deficit that Uchumi is currently having.
News from the NSE today, government bonds have been moved onto the automated platform. What immediate impacts are we likely to see?
Well, one thing about the bond market is that it's been quite vibrant of late. I mean, we've seen the Nairobi Stock Exchange basically being very, very bearish. So most trades or most attention has shifted to the securities market. Mm-hmm. Now, one thing about the ATS is that it's going to inject more transparency into the whole process. I mean, issues of demand and supply. You find that before, during the manual system, it's only a few individuals who had information regarding demand and supply. Mm-hmm. But with the ATS, I think it's more transparent. Demand and supply issues, I mean, that information is basically available to everyone. Then apart from that, there's an issue of liquidity. I think the manual system anywhere is very liquid. I mean, it takes a lot of time before you can actually transfer bonds or before you can buy and sell. But with the automation, basically the market becomes more liquid. It becomes very easy for you to either buy or to sell.
Let's briefly look at the agricultural sector, especially where tea and coffee are concerned. It seems to be a pretty exciting place to be. I was just looking at a report by Mana Capital on return on investment year to date. Kakuzi, Sasini yielded about 48%, 47% respectively. What are your expectations for this week on this particular counters?
Well, I'd still maintain a positive outlook on agriculturals, but on a very temporary basis. One thing about the agricultural sector is that it's very cyclical. Mm-hmm. I mean, at the moment, if you're to look at what's driving, that increase in prices for most agriculturals, it's basically the supply constraints. I mean, look at the tea sector. Major producers, Sri Lanka, India, Kenya, all those countries are experiencing drought situations. So these drought situations are basically precipitating a supply constraint, hence the increase in our price. So it's a bit cyclic in the sense that once you have prices going up, chances are you're going to see more people moving to the tea industry, and what that will do is that it will basically stock up supply at some point. So to me, it's a bit cyclical.